Hey, and welcome to the Bossed Up Podcast, episode 462. I'm your host, Emily Aries, the founder and CEO of Bossed Up. And today we are talking all about knowing your rights as a job seeker, particularly in light of Colorado's transformational law, the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. Now, the good news is, even if you don't live in Colorado, there's a lot of similar legislation passing in dozens of other states now and many more municipalities. So it's so important that you understand your rights as a job seeker or even someone who's just looking for a promotion at work when it comes to how you can leverage pay transparency to make sure you're not underpaid chronically and make sure you're not getting the short end of the stick. Today, July 9th, 2024, is this year's Black Women's Equal Pay Day. Today's the day that represents how much more work Black women must do all the way from January 1st to July 9th of 2024 to earn the same amount as men took home by the end of 2023 on average. So the average man's earnings from 2023, it took this many months, over 7 months, for the average Black woman in America to earn that same amount. So today, more than any other day, is a good day for us to acknowledge not only what individual women can do to help change this, to make sure we're not being underpaid, to negotiate more, and to do all those things that we know we need to do, but what systemic solutions exist, like passing laws that make it illegal to pay people disproportionately based on their identity, things like gender, age, race, etc. Joining me to break all of this down and help us really understand and know our rights as job seekers, as workers in the open labor market, is Louise Myrland, the Vice President of Programs for the Women's Foundation of Colorado. Louise leads research, public policy, grant-making, and statewide community education and engagement efforts to accelerate progress towards economic security for the 2.8 million Colorado women and their families. Her career, dedicated to advancing social justice through education, began in science education outreach, which you'll hear more about in this interview. And prior to joining the Women's Foundation of Colorado in 2014, Louise helped build the Denver Scholarship Foundation from its founding. She designed, led, and evaluated the organization's college access, affordability, and success programs that propelled over 4,000 Denver public school graduates to pursue higher education in Colorado. She earned her Master's of Public Administration from the University of Colorado, Denver, and her Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from the Ohio State University. Louise, welcome to the Bossed Up Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Emily. It's a thrill to be here.
Well, I'm so excited. I feel like this is my chance to share a local gem here in Colorado with the rest of the Bossed Up community, because the work that you do at the Women's Foundation of Colorado is just so impressive and so admirable and just groundbreaking on so many fronts. I'm excited to dive in to the topic of our Equal Pay for Equal Work Act in particular. But tell me a little bit about you and your role and how you got to where you are today.
Emily, thanks so much for the chance to be here to share more about the Equal Pay Law. It's one of my favorite things because really my whole career has been dedicated to advancing equity and justice. Once upon a time, I was a chemist, and that wasn't people-oriented enough for me. So I got out of the lab and started working in educational equity at The Ohio State University, and have been in Colorado now for, nearly 20 years. And all the while, I've been focused on the part that I can play to support great organizations and people who are working to make our communities more fair and inclusive and just. And I'm so lucky to do this work and to do so with great partners like you.
I love it. Chemist to policymaker and advocate. I love a good career transition story here at Bossed Up too, because that's always inspiring to women who are feeling like they want to make a pivot. So call Louise if that sounds like you. Today, we're going to focus on equal pay for equal work. We know Colorado has been leading the way nationally on passing pay transparency laws. We were the first in the nation to do so. Was it in 2019 that it originally got over the finish line?
Yes. In 2019, the culmination of decades of work with tremendous partners really leading this way. The Colorado Women's Bar Association, 95 Colorado, Women's Foundation, and courageous legislative champions, we passed the best Equal Pay for Equal Work Act in the nation. It both prohibits paying people differently when they're doing the same work, and it requires and protects more transparency about pay. And the combination of the two is really making a huge difference for pay equity in our state.
That is so amazing. And I know shortly after we passed our law, similar laws passed on the statewide level in New York, in California. How many other states are, and maybe even municipalities are have passed similar laws at this point? Do you know?
My goodness, it's hard to keep count, but we're seeing good things happening in the states and localities that have followed Colorado's lead, and where once upon a time very few job postings included details about pay and benefits. Now, a quarter of our nation's workers are covered by pay transparency laws and have access to more of the information they need to make the career decisions that are best for them.
That is so exciting. And it's interesting, right? Because some places can pass salary transparency laws separate and apart from the equal pay aspect, like gender and racial wage gaps component. Our Equal Pay Act, Equal Pay for Equal Work, our laws on the books have combined them both, right? Like looking internally to make sure that you're not paying people differently who are doing similar work based on gender or race alone or any other identity aspects, right? And encouraging salary transparency, pay transparency to help prevent that from happening moving forward. Has that been a model that's been adopted elsewhere? That combination?
Other laws have been passed in part or in whole, modeled off of Colorado's example, in states where they may have had the pay equity requirements on the books. They've added pay transparency. We've seen that in California, and similar to Colorado's progress, California is making faster progress to close the gender pay gap since a transparency component was added.
That's exciting. I love that. So, what does this mean for job seekers now? What should job seekers in Colorado know when it comes to their rights when navigating everything from just like looking at and applying for open positions all the way to being in the workplace and wondering if they're getting paid fairly?
There are so many great protections and better opportunities for job seekers and workers in our state that come with this law. First is that when employers are seeking to hire, they have to be transparent about the pay and benefits in job postings. And employers have to be transparent with their employees when they have a job opportunity to be filled. So no longer is it a quiet tap on the shoulder for that one guy they have in mind for an advancement opportunity, but all employees know when there's a vacancy to be filled, and they can determine for themselves whether they want to go for it or not. And in Colorado, employers cannot ask job seekers their past pay. And so a woman who was underpaid in one of her first jobs is no longer doomed to lower pay than she deserves for the whole of her career. Before, employers were prohibited from asking about pay history. Low pay in one job could follow you for your entire working life. Now, employers cannot ask what you used to be paid to determine what you will be paid. Instead, pay is based on the value of the work in the role.
I love that. And that should be determined by the employer first, right? They have to budget for a position when they are ready to hire. I've been saying this to my job search clients for years, even when we don't have legal protections, to essentially refuse to answer the salary history question because it dooms women and marginalized people in particular to sort of replicating past inequities for the remainder of our career. In fact, Jenny, one of my job search clients, was just sharing a story how she's up for a very senior level role position at a nonprofit. I think it's in DC. And they sent her a little sheet after she, I think, went through 2 rounds of interviews and they were very excited to move forward with her. They just sent her a little one pager and said, fill this out so we can move into the next round. And the one pager said, what have you made at all your past positions? And that put Jenny in this impossible position. First of all, Irene, my programs manager, and I were feverishly Googling the salary transparency laws in DC, and the implementation of enforcing their laws was like 1 month later than she had been asked to give this information. And she felt like she was in an impossible position, being forced to disclose because she didn't want to give the impression that they could never afford her. But she's also had a very variable pay over the years. And so you're telling me that when an employer asks you what you made in the past, here in Colorado, we can now say that's not legal, basically. Or how does someone respond if it does happen? Because I know it's still happening, and we can give employers the benefit of the doubt and say maybe they don't know, but what should the job seeker do when they're faced with that conundrum? Because they're trying really hard to be agreeable and show that they're a team player without screwing themselves financially.
Right. Well, let's keep giving employers the benefit of the doubt. Let's assume that the pay range was included in the posting for the job that applicant is interviewing for. And when asked, what have you been paid previously? I think it's a great opportunity to pivot to, well, I see that the pay for this position is stated as, from A to B in this range. I fully expect to be paid near the higher end of that range based on my experience and the value that I would bring to you in these ways. And it's another opportunity to make the case for the value the applicant brings to the table in this position and keeping the focus there.
I love that. I'll drop some links in today's show notes too to our hired job search resources and the negotiation guide that we have, which is a free resource where it's like how to navigate that pivot with grace, like you just did. It certainly helps to have legal protections behind us, but it does make me wonder about enforcement. When job seekers here in Colorado see a job posted without that salary range, what are our avenues for helping enforce that law? And or who's policing this system for us?
Colorado's Department of Labor and Employment has been a tremendous resource for both the implementation and enforcement side of this, but really for employer education as well. And when folks see a job posting without the required information, the description of pay and benefits, when the application is due, the details about how to apply, there is a complaint form that folks can file on CDLE's website. I'll make sure you have that link to share with your listeners. And when CDLE receives those complaints, they can follow up with the employer to make sure that they understand their responsibilities to be more transparent. And when a job seeker is looking at that posting, they can certainly follow up with the employer to request the information directly and reference the educational materials from the Women's Foundation of Colorado, from the Department of Labor and Employment, making it very clear to employers that they are required to provide this information.
And if an employer does not come into compliance, are there any penalties?
The Department of Labor and Employment is authorized to enforce with fines ranging from $500 to $10,000 per violation. So employers certainly have a very good reason to comply, not only because it is the law, but also there are benefits employers enjoy when they're more transparent about the pay and benefits available for the job opportunities they're seeking to fill. One that I hear the most from employers is that the applicants they're receiving are a better match for the role because they understand what the pay range is. Folks who are ready to come work in that role within that pay range are the ones who are applying. And so nobody's wasting time or heartache with a mismatch from the beginning without realizing it. We all benefit from this pay transparency.
Totally. And I recently interviewed Harvard Business School professor Zoe Cullen on this very podcast, and she spoke about the global research she's done in different countries all across the world and looked at different kinds of pay transparency laws. And there were clear deliverables for both employees and employers. There were clear benefits to both parties that she enumerated in our interview too, that I'll link to. So I think that's a really important point. It's like, none of us want to be wasting our time here. HR and recruiters and talent acquisition professionals have better things to do than follow a lead that's going to lead to nowhere. So salary transparency takes that off the equation or out of the equation and really helps reduce time to hire, which I think is so important. As a little side note, I do love being a little vigilante justice warrior when it comes to reporting Colorado employers who are violating this law. In fact, for folks who haven't already heard, on our Take Action page at bossedup.org/take action, we have those forms directly linked for both California, New York, and Colorado. And I've reported quite a few employers over the years. And I'll tell you what, I'm like the biggest fan of CDLE, Colorado's Department of Labor and Employment. They get back to you. They will email you back. They will keep you updated. They will follow through in making those changes. And I've seen job postings turn around. I've seen them having been added to with pay transparency as they should. And I've also seen the numbers of fines that we've collected as a state as a result of violators. So I'm just like a huge fan of that vigilante element of this, because we have laws on the books thanks to folks like you who are advocating for us. Let's enforce them together.
We want as many employers as possible to understand their responsibilities, to be aware of them, and to take action, to comply. We're all going to benefit from more information, more transparency, and thanks for helping to get the word out about Colorado's Equal Pay for Equal Work Act.
Well, I'm obsessed, so it's easy. It's easy to do. One question that comes up often from job seekers here is, what if I'm applying for remote positions that, let's say, are headquartered elsewhere? So I'm based in Denver. I look at a job that's a fully remote position and the company's based in Tennessee, somewhere that doesn't have pay transparency laws on the books. Do they still have to comply? And what are my rights in that instance?
So Colorado's equal pay law applies to all employers in Colorado. That means if you have one employee in Colorado, all of the transparency requirements apply. If an employer is operating completely outside of the state of Colorado and has no employees here, and they are hiring for a position that's going to be performed in Tennessee, no, they don't have to include the information. But job postings that are open to Colorado workers, including those remote positions, they should include the description of pay and benefits. And all employers who are posting for jobs nationwide will experience a benefit from being more transparent, that whether they are required by law in their state or not to do so, whether they are hiring for in-person or remote positions, employers and job seekers all see these benefits. And really, employers who aren't including pay information in job postings, they're really behind the curve in the competition for talent, because more and more job seekers will entirely opt out of applying for an opportunity that doesn't have transparency about pay and benefits in the posting.
I've seen that. There's good evidence to back that up too. Like, it makes sense. Give your talent acquisition professionals everything they have to work with in this competitive labor market, for sure, to fill those open positions. I think that's so key. One thing we saw right after this law was passed was certain companies posting positions saying open to anyone unless you live in Colorado or California or New York. What was the drama there? And did we went to court over that, didn't we?
So those Coloradans need not apply postings really showcase employers that were unwilling to be transparent. And there are few clearer signals an employer can give about how they value or don't value, how they respect or don't respect their workforce. So the folks who are posting for job opportunities excluding Colorado workers, many of them heard from our beloved Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, to help them understand the requirements of Colorado's equal pay law, and many came into compliance. And we've continued to refine Colorado's equal pay law. In 2023, we made some updates to it to address some of the confusion or a little bit of clunkiness and things that we learned about from early implementation that could be smoother for employers and job seekers. We smoothed out some of those clunky parts, and there is no longer really an issue with employers. We're no longer seeing employers posting opportunities and excluding Colorado applicants because pay transparency is the national trend, and because employers are getting used to and no longer so resistant to these changes. And Colorado's law has been updated to ensure that it is as clear and smooth to implement as possible.
I love that. I wanted to ask you specifically about those updates made because one of the trickiest parts of the law had to do with posting promotion opportunities. So if I've been working for a company for 2 years and I'm advocating for advancement, let's say I'm being considered for a promotion into a management position, different job, right? Different job entirely. What does the law say now about how employers have to manage that process? Because I know that was really, I was sitting in at HR conferences where Tracy Marshall from the family program at CDLE was giving lectures to explain implementation on family and just like any new laws, family being our statewide insurance program for paid family and medical leave, any new implementation that's going to impact HR is tricky. Staying in compliance in Colorado in an HR department these days is not easy because Colorado is so active in like leading the forefront of these changes. So I guess the question was, what does the law say we have to do when it comes to salary transparency and those promotion opportunities in particular?
The updates we made in 2023 to ensure equal pay for equal work are intended to clarify those areas where employers were asking a lot of good questions. The law that passed in 2019 required employers to notify their employees of opportunities for promotion. What's a promotion? Who might be considered for it? There were a lot of questions because we were the first to do this. We didn't have a model to follow. We were learning by doing. And what we heard were a lot of good questions from employers really trying to do the right thing. When we updated the law in 2023, we clarified that when there is a job opportunity with a vacancy to be filled, internally, employees need to be notified of that opportunity, whether or not it would be considered a promotion for them. We just took the what's a promotion question out of the equation.
Got it. So it's now a vacancy.
If there's a job opportunity with a vacancy to be filled, internally, employees need to be notified of that job opportunity. And we recognize that there are a number of situations in which a person who's developing their career may be growing in their capacity and readiness to take on additional responsibilities, may have already been performing additional responsibilities. And we clarified that when someone is growing in their role, in those career development situations, employers no longer have to send out an internal notification to all of their employees that someone is growing in their role. So the career developments no longer need to be communicated to every employee because it's not a job opportunity with a vacancy to be filled. So clarifying that difference was really helpful. We also learned a lot from early implementation about the sorts of roles that have a standardized progression. Once an employee has completed a certain number of months in the role, once they have completed a certain number of cases in a case manager progression, they can move from level 1 to level 2, from level 2 to level 3. In those kinds of employment opportunities, in those jobs that have a specified career progression, and there are objective metrics that need to be met to move from one level to the next. simply saying that for folks who are working in jobs that have a career progression pathway, they need to be notified of what those objective metrics are to move from one level to the next.
That's really helpful. And just to clarify, when you say employees need to be notified about a job opportunity with a vacancy to be filled, does that notification include salary transparency in it?
Yes, those postings of job opportunities, whether they are internal or external, they need to include transparency about the pay, the benefits, and other compensation for the role. And in 2023, some of the updates we made also specify that job postings need to include transparency about when and how to apply.
Yeah, an application deadline. That's news to me. I didn't even know that. And that is so relieving to my job seekers who are trying to prioritize their job search, which nowadays requires a lot more applications to go out the door. And so if you know an application deadline is clear, that is so, so helpful. And that's good to know. Just to clarify one other aspect of this, because I'm a nerd about this. When there is that situation where there's a job opportunity with a vacancy to be filled, it requires notification among internal employees with all the transparency that we just described. Does that require public disclosure as well, like external posting or just internal awareness?
Employers are not required to post anything externally. If they do post a job opportunity, then their employees need to be notified. And if they choose to communicate it outside of their organization, in either case, the basic information about pay, benefits, how and when to apply needs to be included. But the requirements are specific to notifying current employees about those job opportunities.
That's really helpful. I can imagine that that clarification process and just like refinement through implementation has been so helpful. And I commend anyone who's the first to do this, right? Like, I love that Colorado has chutzpah, to like be the first to go for things like this. As an entrepreneur, I'm biased towards starting and then failing fast if need be, right? Like going for it, learning along the way, iterating as needed. But in the policy world, that's scarier and harder to pull off. So I tip my hat to you. Let's talk about the results because you all came out with the most impressive report in March of this year that is just so inspiring to me. It made me so proud. I was giving a talk about pay transparency on Equal Pay Day. I was back in March speaking at an amazing day-long celebration for International Women's Day with a group called Tempo out of Milwaukee, which is like our Women's Foundation, one of many groups that has formed a coalition of advocates for women's rights, workers' rights, and women and families doing better in Milwaukee and beyond. And I was giving a talk about pay transparency laws, closing the gender wage gap, how to advocate and support the legislators in their state house, which are struggling to get any kind of majority to pass something like this there. And in the meantime, I'm getting emails from the Women's Foundation of Colorado just blowing my mind with the stats of the results of this law. So tell me a little bit about what you've learned in terms of how this law is truly helping to close the gender pay gap, especially here in Colorado.
We were so excited to share this new research on Equal Pay Day this past March, showing that since Colorado's Equal Pay for Equal Work Act went into effect in 2021, compared to before, Colorado women are earning an average of $2,952 a year more. This means we are closing the pay gap here in Colorado faster than the national average. And states like California and Washington that followed suit after we passed our pay transparency law, they put their own pay transparency laws in place. They're seeing faster progress as well. Here in Colorado, since the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act went into effect, we've closed the gender pay gap in our state by 7 cents on the dollar. And California and Washington have reduced their pay gaps by 3 cents and 5 cents on the dollar, respectively, compared to a national average of only 2 cents on the dollar.
Well, and I'm so encouraged by that, Louise, just to jump in here, because it might not sound like a lot, but this has happened in 3 years in Colorado. And over the last decade, I think the gender wage gap has like barely budged. So the fact that we're making this much progress in 3 short years when we've barely closed it by a cent on average nationally in the past decade is impressive. And my favorite headline from your press release is gender pay gap in Colorado closing 3 times faster than states without pay transparency laws. Like that is so incredible to me.
We're so excited about this faster progress. And we were so pleased to see in this analysis, too, the gender wage gap here in Colorado is closing faster than the national average because women are earning more, not because men are earning less. Men's earnings have held steady over the same period, even when accounting for inflation. Women are earning nearly $3,000 a year more.
That is so incredible. And it's just a good reminder that this is not a gender war. We're not like trying to come after men's salaries. In fact, a lot of women love men and want men to earn more too. I love Brad the Boo and want him to make money. And I don't want his paycheck to go down while my paycheck's going up. That's not what the point of this is. So, closing inequities, right? Solving for those systemic inequities is so, so key. You've been looking for and hearing quite a few stories from women who across the state of Colorado have personally benefited from this law. What kinds of stories are you hearing? And also for my listeners who might have been experiencing the benefits of pay transparency laws, I want to hear your stories. We want to hear your stories. So email them to me at emily@bossedup.org if you resonate with this conversation and have a story to share of your own. But what are some of the stories that you've been hearing, Louise, as you've been measuring the impact of this law?
So my first thought here goes to a woman I've known for a long time who was displaced from her job during the early days of the pandemic. And she had been looking for new opportunities in late 2020, and her job search continued into early 2021. So she, in her job search, experienced the difference of the January 1st, 2021 requirement to be transparent about pay and job postings. She told me about how her job search strategy shifted when she could see how employers valued the role she was considering. She was able to really hone in on the opportunities that made the most sense for her to pursue. And she was able to accelerate her job search and land a job that paid her what she wanted to be paid. So I love hearing those stories about how pay transparency promotes focus in job searches. I've heard from employers on the other side of that coin how much faster the hiring process has been when candidates that are really a good match and fit for the role, because they're self-selecting into the roles that they see as a good fit, what benefits there are for employers. But the stories that move me most in this are about some of the changes that employers took the initiative to make when, in preparation for this law to go into effect, they'd conducted their own internal pay equity analyses. Some of them found that they'd been doing a pretty darn good job and they could celebrate that. Others found some real gaps, and this isn't surprising here. Yes, when employers did the internal pay analyses, they found some pretty big gender pay gaps. And the stories about the employers who saw those gaps and moved to fix them by increasing the pay for the women who had been underpaid on their teams, those pay increases to close gaps that didn't belong there. The stories that women have shared about what that increase in pay means for the way they're able to show up for their families, the birthday party they were able to throw for their kids, the child care bill that was easier to pay to keep going to work, being able to absorb a rent increase and stay in their home. These are real, tangible impacts that change women's lives and the lives of their families. And there's so much more to like what it means to somebody to feel like they are being fairly valued in their role and what that means for how they show up in the workplace, feeling like they're an equally valued member of the team, positions them to be valuable contributors in the team in a way that maybe wasn't quite as possible before, when there was an imbalance that was known or unknown but really present. So we're excited for all of those changes.
I mean, that is so life-changing, right? To get that notification. It's not only a windfall, right? It's like it's better than a windfall. It's an erasure of injustice, right? It's like this feeling of hopefully some relief that you're being compensated fairly, and an ability to let go of resentment if you've suspected or known that you were being paid less than your counterparts based on gender, age, race, whatever. And so just to hear that, like, I can almost feel the stress relief that's probably impacting so many women in Colorado in being able to make those decisions on behalf of our families and our loved ones and our communities. And we know women, when women get windfalls, we spend that money in a better, wiser way that helps our communities and helps our families thrive. And so I love seeing that happen. This just goes back to my personal revolution here at Bossed Up in the past year, which is personal advocacy is not enough. Like, this is what systemic collective advocacy can do for our prospects as women and as just working people. And so there's a time and a place to negotiate on your own behalf and do your due diligence and tap into all the resources that we have at Bossed Up to do that. But there's also a time and a place to make your voice heard in your state house, in our Congress, to help get laws like these passed on the books, because systemic policy changes like these can have a massive impact on so many women's lives. Louise, where can our listeners learn more about the amazing work that y'all are doing at the Women's Foundation of Colorado?
Thanks so much, Emily. Please visit us at wfco.org to learn more. All of the resources Emily pointed to, the latest research, fact sheets about what employers and job seekers need to know, and links to those complaint forms that will get you right to the Department of Labor and Employment if you see job postings that aren't transparent, or if you have been paid unequally and want the Department of Labor to take a look at your complaint and help resolve it. All of those resources are at wfco.org/equal pay.
Love it so much. Louise, thank you so much for all of the amazing work you're doing and for joining me here today to tell us more about it. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Emily, for everything you're doing at Boss Up. And thanks for being a great partner in this advocacy for workplace justice.
For more links to all those great resources we just talked about, including a lot of related episodes and Bossed Up freebies, like our free negotiation guide for job seekers, head to bossedup.org/episode 462. That's bossedup.org/episode 462. You can get a fully written out blog post and transcript that pairs with this episode today. And shout it from the rooftops. Help me raise awareness among Coloradans and all folks, whether you're in America or beyond, to the great work that's being done here so that it can be replicated elsewhere too. And I really want to hear from you. If you have a story, whether you're based in Colorado or not, about how pay transparency policies and laws on the books have directly impacted your job search, your career, your take-home pay, I want to hear about it. Send me an email at emily@bossedup.org, and I'll make sure to connect you with Louise if there's a way that we can get your story out there. Because it's one thing to pass this kind of a law and to become the model state in the nation, to be the first to get it over the finish line. It's another thing to prove that this law is working as intended, benefits employees and employers alike, and that it's not a threat to men's earnings. So we need your stories to help round out that case that we're making so that we can replicate these results nationwide and maybe even beyond. In the meantime, and as always, let's keep Boston in pursuit of our purpose, and together, as America's first Black women's club coined as their motto way back in 1896, let's lift as we climb.